There is some black clouds approaching. Bad weather is coming on in. We're in it for a few days, maybe even a week. So we have to tough this period out. What I'm referring to is the point which I'm at right now. I feel like there's going to be a bit of a lull in performance. Today I tried to do 220, moved very, very slowly. It was a fight. There's some residual fatigue now building up every single day. And it's been kind of well documented for people that are doing squat every day. In the first kind of week, the first few days, you're kind of all right. And then the second week, sometimes even the third week, it's basically like a dark period. John Bros describes this very, very well. And he's spoken on this topic a few times, more than a few times. We just have to stick on through it. You kind of have to battle through this period, accept crappy performance, accept the growing pains of kind of getting into the swing of things when it comes to squatting every day or high frequency training every day. So today, 220 moved slow. I felt fatigued. I felt this like general kind of malaise about me. Things were hurting. The lower back pump was real today. And there was no kind of excuse for it because I slept really well. I slept 10 hours, really good food leading up to it, and then a really poor performance. Now, this could be just a little blimp kind of on the radar, but it could be also a bit of a storm. The reason why I say this is because I kind of experienced the same thing when I first started squatting every day. You take on squat every day, you try to kind of do what you were doing 3 days a week, you try to do it 7 days a week, and then the body starts to reject it. And this rejection, for a lot of people, becomes unbearable and they stop after like a week. A few guys have said to me, I remember trying to deadlift every day. I did it for a week. And then some people like, I did it for 30 days, for 2 weeks or whatever. There's definitely a period here where it's going to be kind of like black clouds, dark weather, really kind of rough times. And you basically just have to stick through it. Once you come out the other end of this bad cloud, bad weather, your body is adapted and then you become basically immune to whatever the stimulus is coming. And you can do 700 freaking days of squat every day. So there's definitely a period. It changes for everyone depending on how hard you hit it. For me, I'm doing squat and deadlift every single day now. Maybe it's been like 3 or 4 or 5 days now. So I'm approaching a week now. So the fatigue is kind of becoming a factor. Now, a lot of these might look to you and now to me that I'm looking at it like normal kind of deadlift performance. But I felt slowish. The central nervous system is talking to me, it's telling me things. But I'm not new to this. I've been through these kind of symptoms. I've been through this, so I'm not kind of alarmed by it. I know exactly what's happening here. So I'm kind of well experienced in this auto regulation thing, and I know exactly what things feel like on bad days and good days and whatever. And I almost kind of expected this period. So it's going to be really interesting to see how I go through it. So today, worked up to 220. I did some back offs, triples at 160, which was kind of around like 70, 72% again of my kind of real 1 rep max. And then after that, I did some squats. They kind of felt sluggish as well. 180 kind of felt horrible, although on camera kind of always kind of looks a bit better. And then after that, I went over to the hyper machine and I did a whole lot of reps there. I feel like the hyper is going to be my friend when it comes to this deadlift everyday business because it's such a restorative exercise. There's basically no axial loading and you can still kind of load it to an extent. So I ended up doing 5 sets of 10 with 30 kilo barbell. And then I took that off and I did 10 sets of 10 just body weight. So a whole lot of movement through that hip hinge, whole lot of movement, kind of wash away the fatigues that maybe, the fatigue that I kind of accumulated. I just feel amazing after I do the hyper. So for those of you that are interested in doing squat every day or deadlift every day or bench press every day, just know that there is a period there, maybe a week to 3 weeks period where you're going to feel crap. And you just have to resist the temptation of quitting at that period. I think most people would quit. You just have to kind of put the hard hat on, put the worker's hat on, the trader hat on, and continue to plowing through. You're not going to feel good through this period. There's going to be, like I said, a dip in performance. You're going to feel slower, weaker. The rest of it, that's just the growing pains. If you want a different kind of perspective to this, go and watch some of the John Bros interviews. Pick up the Matt Perryman book. squat every day. He talks about it in there as well. It's just basically a manifestation of biology trying to catch up with this new stimulus, new workload. Even though for somebody like me who's squatting every day, I've always kind of been, and I've spoken at length about this, I've always kind of been scared of the deadlift because of its nature. You're breaking a dead weight off the floor. You're starting at the end range of motion. You're involving a lot of pushing and pulling, upper body grip. There's a whole lot of central nervous kind of stimulus happening, and it's like a full body assault. With the squat, I feel like it's a lot easier because you're starting at the top, not at the bottom, and there is a bounce to the movement. Even though there's a lot of crossover in the muscles used, the deadlift is by far the more, to me at least, the more challenging lift. I know a lot of you guys have said, oh man, deadlifting's not an issue for me. And I think a lot of that comes down to kind of body morphology, your leverages. Some of you guys have really long arms, like Bob Peoples, for instance. The dude's got like hands hanging by his knees, man. A guy like that is going to be a lot more resilient to doing deadlifts because he's basically doing a rack pull almost. So I could basically do rack pulls, tolerate rack pulls a lot better because the range of motion is smaller. So this is what I'm kind of anticipating. Look at this 220. It looked slow. I don't know whether you guys kind of felt the struggle in me. I was fighting the core, fighting all of that. Didn't feel good. Felt sluggish. But it's expected. So it's going to be interesting to me how I pull up tomorrow. I had 2 long 12-hour day shifts. So maybe there's a bit of residual fatigue from that as well. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see how I pull up tomorrow. But even sitting here, I feel like there's just a general kind of fatigue about my lower back. Basically, that is the motivation for the deadlift every day anyway. It's to strengthen the lower back, strengthen the core. So I'm not all that kind of motivated to see progress quickly in the deadlift. It's all about strengthening the damn thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how I pull up in the next few days to see if this washes away or whether I'm going to be in this kind of low performance period for a week or 2 or whatever. Obviously, the very next thought is loading. What am I going to do with the loading? These back off sets with 160 kilos felt good. So I'll continue to use, I think, 70% for these back off sets. I think anything over becomes too slow a movement and too costly for recovery. 60% will be too light. I'll probably deviate away from the most optimal kind of positioning. Now you can sort of mimic heavy weight with lighter weight, but it's not the real deal. I feel like working with 60% is great for like the muscles involved, but the ideal movement pattern kind of gets a bit whack if you kind of deviate too far away from, the 70%, 80% range. So the next thought is basically, why don't I just not worry about a kind of a heavy single and just go to 70%, do my triples, and then go on to squatting. I do like doing kind of heavy singles every single day just to kind of monitor where I am. And if you auto-regulate that guy really, really well and don't push and you're honest with yourself, then you're not going to get caught out by doing too much or having a rep where you really round it over and working too hard. So have maybe smaller jumps, still go for that training max is what I feel like I want to do. And just kind of go to a point where I'm not breaking form, my core is strong, and the bar is not going too slow. If it slows down too much, obviously you're going to cop the recovery points, and that's not ideal. So it's almost like a test every single day where you are, where you're tracking. That's kind of like how Squat Every Day works. You go on a training max, and then you kind of work off the percentage of that, and you work off of that. That's how kind of the best method that I use for squatting every day. The deadlifts need to be used the same way, because if you use the preconceived idea, like say you're doing 70% on a given day, and so you work up to that 70%, but that 70% might be too heavy for you because you haven't tried the training max for that day. So the training max is kind of like I don't know what analogy I would use. It's kind of like a marker. For some reason, I'm thinking about medieval warfare. The archers don't know, like you can't tell 300 meters away or 200 meters away really easily, but before the war, before the confrontation, you get somebody to walk out there and you put a marker down so you know where 200 meters is. And so as the enemy is approaching and rushing you, you're like, okay, they're approaching that marker, shoot the arrows, and that's where they're going to fall. So it's kind of like that. The training max is kind of like that. You are setting a marker for the day, but that marker needs to be an honest one. You can't just walk that thing out and forget the count halfway through. It needs to be an accurate 200 meters. It needs to be an accurate, training max. This is where rousing yourself too much, music, salts, pre-workouts, all that stuff messes with the marker. It messes with your marker, and then you don't really know what you're doing. And then you're setting off of a false marker that's 70% or whatever, 80% for the squats. And then you get caught out and you burn out, and then you completely miss everything. Your hour's short, way too soon, way too soon, and you're not hitting any of the enemy. So it's kind of like that analogy. Maybe that paints a better picture of what I'm trying to say. So I think using a training max every single day in your deadlift every day or squat every day is a good thing, because it monitors your condition and it gives you an ability to have a proper back off sets and a proper plan for the training session. A lot of you guys have said to me, look, there's testing and then there's building. There's testing exercises and there's building exercises. Louis Simmons talks about this all the time. I think you can use a testing exercise as a builder as well. You just need to be very, very clever of how you load it. That's kind of my perspective on it. I think the deadlift it's high specificity to what we're trying to do. A few of you guys have said you should do RDLs because it's easier on, you don't have to break the dead weight off the floor. That all makes sense. But that's just making the damn thing easier, right? The reason why the RDLs are easier is because you don't have that breaking of the dead force of the dead weight off the floor. So why don't you just load the deadlift to a lower intensity and just do the proper thing? That's kind of how I think about a lot of these things. If you morph too far away from the actual thing you're trying to get good at, there's the carryover becomes murky and unclear. Like the RDL is great, but for me, I'm good at what the RDL does, which is kind of that upper portion of the deadlift. My problem is off the floor. So by doing the RDL, I'm basically saying I'm not concerned about the off the floor business. I'm not training the off the floor, which is kind of counterintuitive to me and counter logical to me, because if I remove the weakness from my exercise, then I'm not really doing justice to my weakness, right? So you might get really good at the RDL and then you go over to the deadlift and you staple to the floor. So maybe deficit deadlifts is something I should be doing. Once again, that's off the floor. So it gets a bit tricky trying to kind of rationalize and kind of justify the choices you make for the exercises. I think the deadlift right now is serving me well. I just have to go easy on it, right? There's a lot of fatigue in me. I'm doing a lot of accessories for the lower back and the posterior chain as well. I just have to be smart about it and be honest with myself. And I know that works. I've got a good track record with auto regulation when it comes to squat every day. So I just have to do the same thing for the deadlift every day. And I'm not going to get discouraged when I have days like this. Now, obviously, from 240 to 220, that's not a big jump. For me, it's the emotional side, the sensory input that I felt, maybe that you guys didn't see on the camera, what concerned me. That's why I feel like the black clouds are coming in, because 200 or 220 felt like a battle. And I felt my core kind of talking to me and all of that, where usually, 220 moves like nothing, 240 moves maybe slower, and I can master 250. Right now, I don't have the ability to hit 250. And it's been probably at least 4 or 5 days since the last time I lifted to 240. So that's kind of where I'm sitting about that. I'm just going to stick to my guns and stick to what I know best, and that's auto regulation and reading the body. Today was kind of an off day, which is kind of making me think the black clouds are coming, but they might not be coming, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how I pull up tomorrow and what choices I make. I think doing triples at 70% is a great kind of thing to do. Tomorrow I'll do bench press, and I'm thinking about what to do with the pin squats. I'm thinking about what to do with the lunges as well, reverse lunges. Those are kind of like near and dear to me. They make me feel really well. I just don't know what to do with the deadlifting. I've never done deadlifting like this before, with squatting every day like this before. I don't know whether the pin squats will take too much out of me. So this is the thing with experimentation, is that you might have ingredients that you trust, that you love to do, and that are kind of working for you. But then you introduce another thing. It's kind of having like two players in the same position. You know, it's like you have two really good strikers. You know, how do you make two guys playing in the same position on the same team? You can play them both to slightly kind of different positions, but then you're not going to get the best out of either of them. So this is the trouble. This is the trouble with all of this sort of stuff. It's kind of like I can use the pin squats, but then my deadlifts are going to suffer, and the flow-on effect from that. You know, so it's hard. Like I want to do the reverse lunges, I want to do the pin squats tomorrow, but I don't know how that's going to compete with the recovery points from something that's really dominant, really hogs the ball, doesn't pass to anybody, scores all the goals. How do I coach that type of player into a team? That's the tricky thing with all of this. And this is why a lot of people go away from some of these exercises, because they're just too damn dominant. It's like kind of having, you know, a volume shooter on a basketball team and then having a whole bunch of guys who like to feel the ball. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. Actually, kind of like the Los Angeles Lakers right now. I don't know whether you guys are basketball followers or not, but the Los Angeles Lakers are basically like loaded with all these ex-superstars. So you got all these dudes who are just kind of like rolled up into one team. On paper, it looks unreal, you know, but practically they don't look like they'll be a good mix. You got a whole bunch of all these dudes who used to be number one options, and now they're supposed to be third, fourth, fifth options. So there needs to be a whole lot of, you know, conversation going on to try and make that team work. Kind of like pin squats, deadlifts, reverse lunges, all those type of things. So you kind of need to pick what sort of strategy you want to kind of emphasize. Are you really getting after the deadlift? Are you getting after the squat? If you're doing both of those, then you really don't have room for many more kind of top players. And it hurts me to say that because I love the pin squat. I'll have to sleep on it and think about it a bit more to kind of work out how I'm going to structure my working out. Is it really going to be just squat, deadlift, and bench? Or do I make room and manipulate some of these movements so I can fit them all together? A lot to think about. It's a work in progress. I'm sure I'll work it out eventually. All right, guys. I'll catch you guys in tomorrow's episode. Peace out.